Chapter 1. The Decision I Can't Undo. There are moments in life that don't feel important when they happen. They don't come with warning signs or dramatic music. They don't announce themselves as turning points. They arrive quietly, disguised as practicality, disguised as trust, disguised as love. This is one of those moments. My name is Victoria Grant, and the decision that changed my life forever happened on an ordinary afternoon inside a house that was already heavy with grief. The air was thick with the scent of stale coffee and silence. I remember sitting at the dining table, the wood cool against my forearms, staring at a brown folder that refused to close properly because it was overfilled. It sat there like a physical accusation. Inside it were documents I didn't have the strength to read: death certificates, property papers, handwritten notes, forms stamped with official seals. Every page carried the weight of finality. My body felt foreign to me then. Pregnancy had changed everything. My back ached constantly, a dull throb that never faded, shifting with every breath. My feet were always swollen, aching in a way that made even standing feel like a marathon. Sleep came in fragments, interrupted by nausea, anxiety, and memories of my mother's last days, the beep of the monitor, the smell of antiseptic, the way her hand felt in mine. Even breathing felt like work. Across from me stood my husband, calm, collected, patient. He looked like the picture of stability in a world that was crumbling. He was wearing a crisp white shirt, sleeves rolled up to his elbows, looking every bit the capable partner I thought I had married. He watched me struggle to organize the papers, watched my hands tremble as I tried to keep everything neat. "Victoria," he said gently, pulling out a chair. The scrape of the chair legs against the floor made me flinch, a sharp sound in the quiet room. "You shouldn't be dealing with this right now." I looked up at him, searching his face for reassurance, finding only a mask of concern. His eyes were soft, his expression open. "You're pregnant," he continued, his voice soft, hypnotic, like a lullaby designed to put my suspicions to sleep. "You're grieving. Let me handle this. I'll take care of everything." There was no urgency in his voice, no pressure, just certainty, just the promise of relief. I hesitated, not because I distrusted him, but because something deep inside me felt uneasy. A quiet voice I had learned to ignore over the years whispered that once you hand something over, you may never get it back. It was the same voice that warned me not to walk down dark alleys, the same voice that told me to check the locks at night. But grief has a way of drowning out intuition. Grief makes you desperate for someone else to carry the load, even for a moment. I slid the folder across the table. The sound it made, paper against wood, was a dry, scratching noise that still echoes in my mind. That was the moment I unknowingly handed my husband control over my past, my future, and the one place in the world that had ever truly belonged to me. I didn't see the flicker of satisfaction in his eyes. I only saw my own relief. Chapter 2. The House That Raised Me. Before I was a wife. Before I was pregnant. Before I became a woman learning how betrayal feels in slow motion. I was a daughter, and my entire world began inside a modest house that most people would have overlooked. It sat at the end of a cul-de-sac, a small structure with peeling blue paint and a porch that leaned slightly to the left. To anyone else, it was just a building, a piece of property on a tax map. To me, it was a fortress. My mother raised me alone. There was no father figure waiting in the wings, no extended family to step in when things got hard. It was just the two of us, learning early what resilience looked like. She worked double shifts, sometimes overnight, coming home with tired eyes and aching feet. I remember the sound of her key in the lock at 6 a.m., the heavy tread of her steps as she tried to be quiet so she wouldn't wake me. Yet no matter how exhausted she was, she made sure that house felt alive. She cooked when she could, filling the kitchen with the smell of spices and warmth, roast chicken on Sundays, cinnamon toast on rainy mornings. She hummed while cleaning. She laughed loudly, as if laughter itself could keep hardship away. That house saw everything. My childhood fears of the dark, the way I would run to her room during thunderstorms, burying my face in her quilt while the windows rattled. My teenage tears over boys who didn't matter, sobbing into my pillow while she stroked my hair and told me that my value wasn't determined by someone else's inability to see it. My first heartbreak. It was where my mother taught me how to stand on my own, how to survive without depending on promises that might never be kept. She taught me how to fix a leaky faucet, how to balance a checkbook, how to look a man in the eye and say no. I remember one summer, a tree fell in the backyard during a storm. It crushed the fence. The neighbors said we needed a man to fix it. My mother just put on her work boots, bought a saw, and we fixed it together, piece by piece, sweating in the July heat. She told me then, "Victoria, never wait for someone to save you. Build your own shelter." As I grew older, I began to understand something important. The house wasn't just shelter. It was security. It was independence. It was proof that my mother had built something permanent in a world that rarely gave her anything freely. It was her legacy. It was the physical manifestation of her love for me. The day I got married, my mother pulled me aside. The celebration buzzed around us, champagne glasses clinking, music playing, people dancing. But her focus never wavered. She looked serious, almost grim. "Victoria," she said quietly, gripping my hands tighter than usual, her eyes searching mine with an intensity that unsettled me. "No matter what happens in your marriage, this house will always protect you. Don't ever let anyone take it from you. It is yours, not his. Yours." I laughed then, brushing it off as emotional sentiment, thinking she was just being dramatic. I didn't notice the seriousness in her eyes. She knew something I didn't. She knew that people change, but foundations stay. She knew that love is fragile, but a deed is binding. She knew that a woman without a home of her own is vulnerable in ways she can't even imagine until it's too late. That house was my safety net, the one thing that stood between me and the abyss, and I had just handed the scissors to the man who would cut it without a second thought. Chapter 3. Marrying into a family I didn't know. When I married my husband, I thought I was marrying a man. I didn't realize I was marrying into a system. From the very beginning, his family operated on a complex web of unspoken rules, a secret code I wasn't given the key to. It was subtle at first, a raised eyebrow when I spoke too loudly, a sudden silence that fell over the room when I entered, the way conversations would shift topics seamlessly as if they were hiding something. His brother was the loudest voice in every room, confident, charming, always discussing money and influence. He was the sun, shining so brightly that everyone else was just a planet orbiting his approval. Conversations bent around him naturally. He would interrupt me mid-sentence and no one would blink. No one would say, "Victoria was speaking." They would just turn their heads to him, eager for his next witticism. My husband, by contrast, often softened in his presence. He deferred. He listened. He agreed. He became a smaller, quieter version of himself, like a shadow shrinking at noon. I noticed it, but I ignored it. I told myself it was just respect. I told myself it was just family dynamics, that every family had its quirks. His parents were polite but distant. They never insulted me directly, never raised their voices. But they never welcomed me either. I was like a piece of furniture they hadn't chosen but tolerated because it came with the house. I tried so hard to earn my place. I cooked their favorite meals, spending hours in the kitchen perfecting recipes that weren't mine. I hosted their parties, scrubbing floors until my hands were raw. I arrived early to set up and left late to help clean up. I learned their history. I bought thoughtful gifts for birthdays and anniversaries. I tried to be the perfect daughter-in-law. Still, I always felt like a guest. I felt like an observer in my own life. I remember one Thanksgiving dinner in particular. They were sitting around the mahogany table, discussing a family vacation for the summer, planning dates and locations. I sat there, smiling, waiting to be asked for my opinion. They planned the whole trip, the rental house, the activities, the meals, without once looking at me. When I finally cleared my throat and asked, "What about the dates?" I might have work. His mother looked at me with a blank expression, fork halfway to her mouth, and said, "Oh, we assumed you'd just adjust." It wasn't just vacations. It was everything. One evening, they were discussing investments, real estate, the future of the family trust. I tried to contribute, mentioning a small article I'd read about market trends. His brother chuckled, a condescending sound that vibrated in his chest. "Victoria, darling," he said, swirling his wine, "leave the finance to the men. Stick to the domestic arts. You're so good at them." The table erupted in polite laughter. My husband laughed too. That was the moment that stung the most. He didn't defend me. He joined them. Marriage, I learned, does not automatically grant belonging. Sometimes it only reveals where you truly stand. And I was standing on the outside, looking in through a window I couldn't open, shivering in the cold while they sat by the fire, warm and oblivious to my existence. I was the wife, but I was never the family. Chapter 4. When everything started to fall apart. My mother's illness didn't arrive with a dramatic crash or a sudden collapse. It didn't announce itself with a scream or a frantic siren. Instead, it whispered its way into our lives, a quiet thief stealing her vitality bit by bit, day by day. It started with a cough that lingered just a week too long, a dry, rasping sound that punctuated the silence of our evenings like a warning bell I chose to ignore. Then came the fatigue she couldn't explain, the way she would sit down just for a minute and stay there for an hour, her eyes staring at nothing, her hands resting listlessly in her lap. Then came the doctor visits, each one ending with more tests and fewer answers, a trail of breadcrumbs leading us deeper into a forest we couldn't escape. Soon, my world shifted from the warmth of our home to the cold, antiseptic reality of hospital waiting rooms. I spent countless nights in those rooms, watching the seconds crawl by on sterile white clocks that seemed to mock the urgency of my grief with their slow, rhythmic ticking. At 3 a.m., the hospital has a specific sound, the distant hum of cleaning machines, the occasional squeak of rubber-soled shoes on linoleum, the muffled pages over the intercom. It's a lonely liminal space. I learned the rhythm of hospital life, the rhythmic beeping of machines that became the soundtrack to my nightmares, the hushed, urgent conversations of nurses in the hallway, the way hope rises and falls with every update from a doctor whose face you can't quite remember. I remember bringing her favorite wool blanket from home, the one with the frayed edges and the smell of lavender and laundry soap. I thought it would ground her, keep her connected to the world we were losing. But in that sterile room, even the blanket seemed to lose its color. I tried to feed her tea, her favorite Earl Grey, but she could only manage a few sips, her hands too weak to hold the cup. During that time, my husband became indispensable, or at least, that was the performance he gave. He was the rock I leaned on, or so I thought. He was the one who made the phone calls, his voice calm and authoritative while mine was shaking. He spoke confidently to the doctors, using medical jargon he'd looked up online to sound like an equal, a manager of the crisis rather than a grieving son-in-law. I remember one nurse giving me a long, sympathetic look as he explained his plan for her care. I thought she was pitying my weakness. Now I realized she was seeing something I was too blind to notice. He offered to manage the mounting pile of documents, the insurance forms, the medical history, the legal papers that I couldn't bear to touch. "You shouldn't be stressing yourself, Victoria," he reminded me often, his hand a heavy, possessive weight on my shoulder. "You're pregnant. You need to think of the baby. You're too emotional to make these decisions. Let me take care of things." I was so drowned in sorrow and exhaustion, my mind a fog of grief and hormones, that I let myself lean on him. I let myself believe that his strength was my strength. I was building my life on a foundation he was slowly dismantling, one signature at a time. I mistook his control for care and his ambition for affection. I didn't realize that every time he said, "Let me handle it," he was taking another piece of my future. By the time the masks finally came off and I saw the man underneath, the damage was already done. The thief wasn't just the illness. The thief was in the room with me, holding my hand, whispering promises while he planned his exit. I was losing my mother, and I was losing myself, and I was too grateful to even notice. Chapter 5. The day I lost her. When my mother died, I didn't collapse. I didn't scream or tear at my clothes like they do in the movies. I froze. It was as if someone had reached into my chest and turned off a switch that controlled my ability to feel. The world felt smaller, quieter, as if someone had turned down the volume on life itself. Colors seemed less vibrant, sounds were muffled, and time lost all meaning. People hugged me at the funeral, a procession of black coats and pitying eyes. Their voices blurred together into a meaningless hum of "sorry for your loss" and "she's in a better place." I nodded at the right moments, said the right words, played the part of the grieving daughter perfectly. But inside, something had shut down. I was a ghost haunting my own life. I remember the smell of the lilies at the service, sickeningly sweet, a scent that now makes me nauseous. I remember the feel of the earth as I threw a handful onto her casket, the finality of that sound hitting the wood. I remember the way the neighbors looked at me, with that mix of sympathy and curiosity, wondering how the pregnant girl would manage alone. A few days later, while the grief was still fresh and raw, an open wound that bled with every breath, my husband brought up the will. We were sitting at the kitchen table. The morning sun was streaming in, indifferent to my pain, illuminating the dust motes dancing in the air. He was buttering a piece of toast, the scrape of the knife loud in the quiet room. "She left everything to you," he said casually, as if he were discussing the weather or the grocery list. He didn't look up. He just kept spreading the butter, methodically, edge to edge. But probate takes time. It's a legal mess. Lots of red tape. Forms to file, courts to deal with. "I'll handle it." The word probate hung in the air, heavy and foreign. I didn't know what it meant, really. It sounded official. It sounded like something only a man like him could navigate. The casualness of it struck me, but I was too numb to process it. I didn't question him. I didn't ask to see the papers. I didn't ask why he had looked at them before me. I was still learning how to exist in a world where my mother didn't. I was still trying to remember how to breathe without my chest aching. I felt a surge of guilt then, sharp and hot. Guilt because I was relieved. I was relieved that I didn't have to deal with it. I was relieved that someone else was taking the wheel. I thought he was taking a burden off my shoulders. I thought he was protecting me from the bureaucracy of death. I didn't realize he was taking my inheritance out of my hands. He reached across the table and covered my hand with his. His palm was warm, dry, steady. It felt like comfort. It felt like safety. But now I know it was a shackle. I didn't realize that while I was mourning the past, weeping for what I had lost, he was already calculating the future, counting coins that weren't his to count. I sat there, staring at my cold coffee, feeling the weight of his hand, and let him take the reins, not knowing he was steering us off a cliff. Chapter 6. The Paperwork Trap. Time passed differently after her death. It didn't flow in a straight line. It looped and stuttered. Days blended into weeks, weeks into months, a gray smear of existence. The seasons changed outside the window, the leaves turning from green to gold to brown, then falling to rot on the wet earth. But inside, a coldness was growing that had nothing to do with the weather. My belly grew rounder, the life inside me kicking and turning, a constant reminder that time was moving forward even if I felt stuck in the past. Sometimes, late at night, I would feel the baby move and wonder what kind of world I was bringing it into. A world of secrets. A world of silence. Whenever I asked about the house or the documents, my husband's tone shifted. It was a subtle change at first, like a drop in barometric pressure before a storm. He became defensive, irritable. If I asked over dinner, he would put down his fork with a heavy sigh, as if my question was an unbearable burden. "Why are you stressing yourself?" he would ask, his voice tight with restrained annoyance. "Do you not trust me? I'm your husband. I'm handling it." He would turn his back to me, ending the conversation. "I'm doing this for us," he would say, guilt-tripping me into silence. Yes, that word became a weapon. It kept me quiet. It made me feel ungrateful. I felt guilty for doubting him. After all, he was the father of my child. He was my partner. He was the one dealing with the mess of probate while I sat around grieving. I told myself I was being paranoid. I told myself that grief was making me irrational, that pregnancy hormones were making me crazy. But deep down, a small voice was screaming that something was wrong. A knot in my stomach that wouldn't go away, tighter than any contraction. I started noticing other things, small things. He would take phone calls in the garage, pacing back and forth, his voice low and urgent. When I asked who it was, he'd say, "Just work," or "Wrong number," without meeting my eyes. He suddenly had a business trip to the city, something that had never happened before. He was gone for 2 days. 2 days where I sat in that big, empty house, feeling the walls closing in on me. The house, my mother's legacy, felt different without her. It felt colder. The shadows in the hallway seemed longer, reaching for me. At night, the wind would howl through the eaves, and it sounded like a warning. I realized then that I wasn't just grieving, I was lonely. I was isolated, and he was the one holding the key. I would see letters arrive that he would snatch from the mailbox before I could look at them. "Just bills," he would say, slipping them into his pocket. I wanted to believe him. God, I wanted to believe him. Because if I didn't believe him, if I admitted to myself that the man sleeping next to me was a stranger, then I had truly lost everything. So I stayed quiet. I let the trap close around me, inch by inch, paralyzed by my own need for stability, praying that I was wrong, praying that he was the man I thought I married, while the house whispered truths I refused to hear. Chapter 7. The Letter That Changed Everything. The letter arrived on a quiet Tuesday afternoon. It was one of those rare days where the world felt peaceful, where the impending storm of my life seemed to have paused for breath. The house was silent, but for once, the silence didn't feel oppressive. It felt expectant. I was in the nursery, a room I had been setting up with a desperate kind of hope. The walls were painted a soft yellow, the crib was assembled, and I was standing at the changing table, folding baby clothes. Tiny pastel shirts, socks that looked like they belonged to a doll, soft blankets that smelled of new beginnings. I was dreaming of the future. I was imagining the baby sleeping in this room, safe, protected, oblivious to the grief that still clung to the rest of the house. I was imagining a version of my life where my husband was the man I thought he was, where we were a family, where the us he kept talking about was real. Then I heard the mail slot clatter, a mundane sound. A sound I heard every day, but today, for some reason, it pulled me out of my reverie. I went downstairs, my hand resting on my belly, feeling the solid thump of a kick. I walked to the front door and saw the pile of mail on the floor. Most of it was junk, coupons for pizza, flyers for lawn care. But one envelope stood out. It was thick, white, official-looking. It wasn't addressed to me. It wasn't addressed to my husband. It was addressed to my husband's brother, but it was sent to our address. My first thought was confusion. Why would his brother getting mail here? He had his own house, his own life. My second thought was curiosity. Maybe it was a mistake. Maybe it was something for the family trust. I picked it up. It felt heavy in my hand. I stared at it for a long time, standing there in the hallway, the baby clothes forgotten upstairs. I shouldn't open it, I told myself. It's not mine, but the unease I had been burying for months suddenly clawed its way to the surface. The small voice that had whispered warnings about garage phone calls and business trips was now screaming. With shaking hands, I tore open the envelope. Inside were legal documents, property transfer papers. I stared at them, the words swimming before my eyes, refusing to coalesce into meaning. Deed of transfer, grantor, grantee. I read the address. 142 Willow Creek Lane. My address. My mother's house. My childhood home. The place where I took my first steps. The place my mother promised would always protect me. Transferred. To him. Not to me. To my husband's brother. I felt dizzy. The hallway spun around me. My knees gave way and I sank to the floor, the papers scattering around me like fallen leaves. I picked them up and read them 3 times, hoping, praying I was mistaken. Praying it was a draft, a mistake, a bad joke. But there it was. My mother's name. And below it, a signature that looked terrifyingly like mine. A forgery. A theft. A betrayal so absolute it took the breath from my lungs. I remembered the day my mother signed the original deed, how proud she looked, how her hands shook with excitement. Now, I was looking at the erasure of that pride. I realized then what his business trip to the city had been for. It wasn't business. It was theft. He had gone to meet a notary to finalize the paperwork to sell my future out from under me. I felt physically sick, a wave of nausea rolling over me that had nothing to do with the pregnancy. At that exact moment, the baby kicked hard, a sharp reminder of the life growing inside me. A life I was now bringing into a stolen house. The irony choked me. I was folding clothes for a nursery that didn't even belong to us anymore. I wasn't just a guest in my own home anymore. I was a trespasser. I was a squatter in the house my mother built, waiting to be evicted by the man who had promised to love me forever. Chapter 8. Confrontation without remorse. I don't remember walking from the hallway to the living room. I don't remember my feet touching the floor. I only remember the papers crinkling in my clenched fist, a sound that seemed deafening in the silence of the house. My husband was sitting on the sofa, watching the evening news. He looked so normal, so relaxed. He had a glass of scotch in his hand, the amber liquid catching the light, the ice clinking softly as he swirled it. It was a crystal tumbler I had bought him for our first anniversary. His brother was there too, leaning against the mantel, looking like the cat who had just swallowed the canary. They stopped talking when I entered. They saw my face. They saw the papers. And they knew. I threw the deed onto the coffee table. It landed between them, a white flag of war. What is this? My voice was a whisper, a broken thing. I expected denial. I expected him to jump up, to tell me it was a mistake, to tell me he would fix it. I expected him to fight for us. Instead, he just looked at it. He didn't flinch. He didn't look guilty. He didn't apologize. He took a sip of his drink, savoring the burn, and set it down on a coaster, careful not to leave a ring. "It's a deed, Victoria," he said, his voice calm, reasonable, as if he were explaining something to a child who had interrupted the adults. I transferred the house to Mark. "Why?" I screamed, the sound tearing at my throat. "It's my house. My mother left it to me. It's for the baby." He sighed, a sound of long-suffering patience. "We need the liquidity," he said. "Mark has a business opportunity. It's a sure thing. We're keeping it in the family." "Family?" I choked out. "I am your family. This baby is your family." He looked at me then, really looked at me, and his eyes were empty. There was no love there. There was no partnership. "Family helps family," he said simply. The words hung in the air, a twisted mockery of everything I believed in. Family helps family. I asked him where I fit into that definition. Was I not family? Was I just an incubator? A roommate with benefits? He didn't answer. He just looked away, back to the television, dismissing me. And then, from the fireplace, his brother laughed. It wasn't a nervous laugh. It wasn't an apology. It was a cold, cruel sound. "You're still living here," Mark said, his voice dripping with condescension, a smirk playing on his lips. "What's the problem? You have a roof over your head. Be grateful." That laugh ended my marriage. In that moment, looking at the two of them, the husband who had sold me out and the brother who had bought me, I realized something chilling. They never planned to tell me. They were going to let me live in my own house as a guest, dependent on their charity, until they decided to kick me out. I wasn't a partner. I was a pawn. And the game was over. Chapter 9. Kicked out at my lowest. The silence that followed his brother's laugh was short-lived. It was broken by the sound of my own voice, a voice I barely recognized. It was shrill, desperate, fueled by a rage that had been simmering for months. I refused to stay silent. I refused to be the good wife, the quiet victim, the grateful charity case in my own home. I yelled. I threw his words back at him. I told him he was a thief, a liar, a coward. I told him he wasn't half the man my mother was. And everything escalated. My husband didn't yell back. He didn't lose his temper. That would have been too human. Instead, he became ice. He looked at me with a detached curiosity, as if I were a specimen in a jar that was behaving erratically. "Look at you," he said softly, shaking his head. "You're hysterical. You're being emotional, irrational. This is exactly why I couldn't trust you with the house. You're not stable, Victoria." He used my grief against me. He used my pregnancy against me. He gaslit me until the room spun, until I started to question if maybe he was right, maybe I was crazy. But then I looked at the deed on the table, the physical proof of his betrayal, and I knew I wasn't crazy. I was just cornered. Then he said the words I'll never forget, words that severed our marriage forever, sharper than any knife. He checked his watch, a casual gesture that made my blood run cold. "You have 2 hours to pack," he said. "If you can't be civil, if you can't be grateful, then you can leave. Mark owns the house now, and he wants you out. 2 hours. To pack a lifetime. To pack my mother's memory. To pack the nursery I had just finished. Pregnant. Grieving. Homeless." I ran upstairs, not because I was obeying him, but because I had to get away from the suffocating air of that room. I grabbed suitcases, garbage bags, anything I could find. I packed blindly. I packed my mother's photo albums, her jewelry box, the quilt from her bed. I packed my clothes, not caring if they matched. I packed the baby's things, the tiny socks, the soft blankets, sobbing as I swept them into a bag. I paused at the door of the nursery. The yellow walls seemed to mock me now. The crib stood empty, waiting for a baby that would never sleep there. I ran my hand over the railing, feeling the smooth wood, knowing that my child would never know this room is home. I left the crib. I left the furniture. I left the life I thought I was going to have. I moved through the house like a whirlwind, driven by adrenaline and panic. Every room held a memory I was leaving behind. The kitchen where we cooked dinner. The living room where we watched movies. The bedroom where we conceived our child. It was all a lie. I dragged my bags down the stairs one by one. They watched me from the living room. My husband and his brother. They didn't offer to help. They didn't speak. I could hear the faint clink of glass against glass. They were pouring another drink. Celebrating. They just watched, arms crossed, like guards ensuring the prisoner didn't steal the silverware. No one stopped me. No one said, "Wait, let's talk." No one said, "I love you." I opened the front door. It had started to rain, a cold, gray drizzle that matched the ruin of my life. I stepped out onto the porch, the same porch where my mother had told me this house would always protect me. The rain mixed with the tears on my face. I turned back for one last look, not at them, but at the house. "I'm sorry," I whispered to the walls. "I'm so sorry I failed you." And then I walked away. I walked into the rain, pregnant and alone, dragging my life behind me in wet garbage bags, with nothing but my dignity and the ash of my burnt-down life. I walked until I couldn't see the house anymore, and only then did I let myself scream. Chapter 10. The Mother Who Saw It Coming. The days after I left were a blur of cheap motels and fear. But then I found a lawyer. Not my husband's lawyer. My mother's lawyer. An old man named Mr. Henderson who had known her for 30 years. When I walked into his office, shaking and pregnant, he didn't look surprised. He looked relieved. "I've been waiting for you, Victoria," he said. "Your mother left instructions." We went to court. My husband and his brother were there, looking smug in their expensive suits. They thought they had won. They thought they had outsmarted a grieving daughter. They had the deed. They had the signature. They had the arrogance of men who had never been told no. The judge asked if there was any evidence to contest the transfer. My husband's lawyer stood up, smooth and confident, ready to dismiss me. But Mr. Henderson just smiled. "Your Honor," he said, his voice trembling with age but steel underneath. "We would like to submit Exhibit A. A video will recorded 3 days before the deceased passed away." My husband's head snapped up. The color drained from his face. He didn't know about a video. He thought he had covered every base. The courtroom darkened as the bailiff rolled in a television. There was a crackle of static, and then my mother's face filled the screen. She looked tired, pale, but her eyes were sharp. They were the eyes of a woman who had fought for everything she had. She looked directly into the camera, directly at us. "My name is Eleanor Grant," she said, her voice filling the room, strong and unwavering from beyond the grave. "I am of sound mind, and I know what is happening." The silence in the courtroom was absolute. You could hear a pen drop. "I know my son-in-law has been helpful," she continued, a dry chuckle in her voice. "Too helpful. I see the way he looks at my house. I see the way he looks at my papers. My husband shifted in his seat, loosening his tie. He looked like he wanted to bolt. I trust no one blindly, she said. Not even him. Especially not him. She leaned forward, her face filling the frame. I remember the day he asked for Victoria's hand. He didn't promise to love her. He promised to take care of her. There is a difference. One is a partnership. The other is a guardianship. And my daughter does not need a guardian. I felt tears pricking my eyes. She had seen it all along. Everything I own belongs to my daughter, Victoria Grant. This house is her sanctuary. It is her safety. Anyone who tries to take it from her, anyone who tries to trick her, does not have my blessing, and they do not have my consent. This video supersedes any paper document signed after this date. She paused, and for a second, it felt like she was looking right at me. And to my grandchild, she said, her voice softening, breaking just a little. I may not be there to hold you, but I will be the roof over your head. I will be the walls that keep you warm. Victoria, if you are watching this, it means he tried. It means he failed you. But I didn't. I knew you would need a net when the wire snapped. Stand up, baby girl. Take back what is yours. The screen went black. The silence that followed was deafening. It was heavy with the weight of truth. The judge took off his glasses and wiped his eyes. He looked at my husband with a mixture of disgust and pity. My husband was slumped in his chair, a man whose castle of lies had just crumbled into dust. He wouldn't meet my eyes. He knew he had lost. And for the first time since he told me to pack, I breathed. Chapter 11, Watching Them Lose. The judge ruled swiftly. There was no debate. There was no deliberation. The evidence was overwhelming, irrefutable, and damning. The property transfer was fraudulent. It was null and void. It was reversed immediately, as if it had never happened. The judge's voice boomed through the courtroom, each word a hammer blow to the walls my husband had built around me. I find the transfer of 142 Willow Creek Lane to be invalid due to pre-existing testamentary instructions and clear evidence of duress and deceit. He looked at my husband and his brother over his spectacles. And frankly, gentlemen, I am disgusted. The court will also be referring this matter to the district attorney's office for potential criminal charges. My husband's brother lost the house he thought he had stolen. The smirk was gone from his face, replaced by a look of sheer disbelief. He turned on my husband, whispering furiously, his face turning red. The alliance was broken. The family that helped family was eating itself alive right there in the courtroom. My husband lost his credibility. He lost his standing. He lost his wife. He sat there, pale and sweating, tugging at his collar as if it were suddenly too tight. He tried to catch my eye, perhaps to plead, perhaps to manipulate me one last time, but I looked right through him. I watched their confidence crumble. I watched the arrogance drain from their faces as they realized they had underestimated me. They had underestimated my mother. They had underestimated the power of a woman who has nothing left to lose. They never looked at me the same again. They looked at me with fear. They looked at me as if I were a stranger, a dangerous variable they hadn't accounted for. And I realized I liked it better that way. I wasn't the victim anymore. I wasn't the prey. I was the one holding the cards. Mr. Henderson leaned over and patted my hand. She would be proud of you, Victoria, he whispered. She knew you had it in you. As the gavel banged down, sealing their fate, I felt a weight lift off my chest that I hadn't even realized I was carrying. It was like breathing pure oxygen for the first time in months. The air in the room seemed to clear. I stood up, smoothing my dress over my belly, feeling the baby kick, a kick of triumph, not fear. I didn't wait for them. I didn't wait for an apology I knew would never come. I turned my back on them and walked toward the door, toward the sunlight streaming in from the hallway. I was walking back to my life. I was walking back to my house. My mother's house. My daughter's house. My house. And this time, I held the keys, and I knew exactly which locks to change. I walked out of that courtroom, and for the first time in years, the air didn't feel heavy. I remember the weight of the bronze door as I pushed it open, the way the sunlight hit the marble steps, turning them into a path of gold. Every step away from that building was a step toward the woman I used to be, the one who wasn't defined by a folder of stolen papers or a husband who never saw her worth. Behind me, the muffled sounds of the court faded, but the silence wasn't empty. It was full of possibility. I stood on the sidewalk for a long time, just breathing. I watched people rush by, oblivious to the war that had just been fought and won inside those stone walls. My husband, my ex-husband, was still inside, probably arguing with his lawyer, probably trying to salvage the wreckage of his reputation. But I didn't care. I felt a strange sense of pity for him, actually. He had traded a life of love and family for a house he didn't even want, a house he only saw as numbers on a ledger. I filed the final divorce papers the next day. The office was small, smelling of old paper and toner, but the clerk was kind. She handed me the pen, and as I signed my name, my hand didn't tremble once. It was a clean break, a surgical removal of a cancer that had been growing in my life. I walked out of that office and realized I wasn't Victoria Grant, the victim. I was Victoria Grant, the survivor. The house was mine. The future was mine. I drove back to Willow Creek Lane, the road stretching out like a ribbon of hope. I turned into the driveway, and the house seemed to sigh in relief. It looked different in the light of my victory. The peeling paint didn't look like neglect anymore. It looked like character. The leaning porch didn't look weak. It looked like it was bowing to me. I put the key in the lock, the original key, the one my mother had given me, and I turned it. The click was the sweetest sound I had ever heard. It was the sound of a sanctuary returning to its rightful owner. I walked inside, and the shadows were gone. The house felt warm, as if it had been holding its breath, waiting for me to come home. I walked through every room, touching the walls, reclaimed and reborn. I was free, truly, finally free. 6 months later, the house was no longer quiet. It was filled with the soft, rhythmic sound of a rocking chair and the tiny, sweet sighs of a new life. I brought my daughter, Eleanor, home on a Tuesday, the same day of the week the betrayal had arrived. But today, the Tuesday belonged to us. I named her after my mother, a tribute to the woman who had protected us from beyond the grave. Every time I looked at her, I saw my mother's fierce eyes and her determined chin. Eleanor was the living proof that out of the ashes of betrayal, something beautiful could grow. We spent our days in the nursery, the soft yellow walls now glowing with actual joy. I spent hours rocking her, telling her stories of the house, of the woman who built it, and of the strength she would one day inherit. I watched her grow, day by day, month by month. I watched her take her first shaky steps on the same floorboards where I had once collapsed in despair. I heard her first words in the kitchen where my husband had once told me I had 2 hours to pack. We reclaimed every inch of that property. We planted a garden in the backyard, roses and lavender, the air sweet with their scent. We fixed the fence, the one my mother and I had labored over so many years ago. Every nail I hammered was a statement of permanence. This was our fortress. This was our legacy. There were nights, of course, when the fear would try to creep back in. Nights when the wind would howl and I would worry that another storm was coming. But then I would hear Eleanor's steady breathing over the monitor, and I would remember the judge's voice and my mother's voice, and I would know that we were safe. The house was protecting us, just as she promised. I wasn't just a mother. I was a guardian of a history that almost got erased. I was the keeper of the flame. And as I looked at my daughter, I knew she would never have to wonder if she belonged. She was the heart of this home. We were more than survivors. We were a family, forged in fire and tempered by truth. Our story wasn't a tragedy anymore. It was an epic of resilience. So, what is the lesson in all of this? I've spent a lot of time reflecting on that as the years have passed and Eleanor has grown into a strong, spirited girl. Grief makes you vulnerable, yes. It strips away your layers until you are raw and exposed. But in that rawness, you find out what you are truly made of. You find out that your intuition is a compass that never lies, if only you have the courage to follow it. I lost a husband who never saw me as a person, only as a means to an end. But in losing him, I found myself. I gained clarity that no marriage could ever provide. I gained a strength that wasn't borrowed, but built from the ground up. I hope my story serves as a reminder to anyone listening who feels lost in the fog of betrayal. Trust is a gift, and it should only be given to those who prove they are worthy of holding it. Don't silence that small voice in your gut for the sake of keeping the peace. Peace without truth is just a temporary truce. Don't sacrifice your future to save a present that is already crumbling. You are the architect of your own destiny. You hold the deed to your own life. And no one, not a husband, not a brother, not a system, has the right to take that from you unless you let them. Stand tall. Reclaim your space. Protect your sanctuary. Because at the end of the day, the only walls that truly protect you are the ones you build within yourself. My mother was right, the house protected me. But she was also right about something else. I was the one who had to walk through the door. Thank you for walking this path with me. If you found strength in these words, if you felt a connection to my journey, please subscribe to my channel and like this video. Your support helps me bring more stories of resilience and truth to light. Share this with someone who might be sitting at a dining table right now, staring at a folder, wondering if they should trust their heart or the man across from them. Tell them they are not alone. Let's build a community where truth is the foundation and strength is the roof. We are all in this together. Stay strong, stay vigilant, and never stop fighting for what is rightfully yours. This is Victoria Grant, signing off from the house that raised me and the life that saved me. See you in the next story.